All right. Ready to deep dive into something kind of crazy? We're going to unpack the power of words. You know how what we say literally shapes our reality, our relationships, like everything.
It really is wild when you stop and think about it. Like just simple words, right? They can have so much weight.
Totally. And to help us figure this out, we're going through What We Say Matters by Judith Hanson Lasater. Now, get this. This woman is a yoga teacher and a therapist. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's such a fascinating combo. You can tell she's been thinking about mindful communication for a long time.
Decades even. Okay, so chapter 1. She jumps right in saying, words create our reality. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like,
Hmm?
ever had someone give you a really awesome compliment that just like made your whole day better?
Yeah.
Or the opposite, someone says something mean and it just like ruins your mood.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's what I mean. Words can hit us hard.
Yeah,
And they kind of stick with us too, you know?
totally. Like they get stuck in your head almost.
Exactly. And Laster is saying even the stuff we tell ourselves in our own minds, that impacts us too. If you're always putting yourself down, you're just reinforcing a negative view of yourself.
Yeah.
And then messes with your confidence, how you act around others, everything.
So it's like we're almost programming our brains with the way we talk, huh? So if we can get ourselves to talk nicer to ourselves, that could be huge.
You got it. And that leads us perfectly into chapter 2, where Lassiter dives into mindful listening. That's the foundation for good communication, she says.
Mindful listening. Okay, most people probably think they're pretty good listeners already. What's different here?
It's easy to think we're good at it.
Yeah.
But mindful listening, it's like this whole other level. It takes work. It's not just hearing the words, but really trying to understand the other person. What are they feeling? What are they trying to get across, you know?
So you're saying go deeper than just the surface level of the conversation.
Exactly. Tune into the nuances of what's being said. Lassiter even gives us some tips for this. She says, ditch the distractions first off. Put those phones away. Make eye contact. Actually focus on the person who's talking.
Oh man, that's so true. I catch myself multitasking when people are talking to me, and I know I don't listen as well when I'm doing that.
We all do it. Another thing is, don't plan out your response while they're still talking. It's hard. But try to really understand what they're saying first before you jump in with your own thoughts.
Right, put your own agenda aside for a sec and just try to really hear them.
Exactly. And this can be really tough, especially if you disagree with them or the conversation is heated. But that's where mindful listening is most important, you know? It allows you to understand each other, even when you have different opinions.
I get it. Mindful listening, it's all about making space for genuine connection and understanding. But what about the other side of the coin? How we speak, not just listen.
Good point. That's exactly what Chapter 3 is about, speaking with intention and clarity. Lassiter says, even before you open your mouth, ask yourself, what am I hoping to achieve by saying this? What kind of impact do I want to make?
Whoa. It's like setting an intention, but for your conversation.
Right, like setting the stage.
But man, staying intentional when things are getting heated, that's tough. Got any advice for that?
The Lassiter emphasizes tone and timing. Even if you have good intentions, saying something in the wrong tone or at the wrong time, it can totally backfire.
Like you can give someone a compliment, but if you say it sarcastically, it's not a compliment anymore.
Exactly. Everything needs to match your words, tone, even body language. Sometimes the most mindful thing you can do is just pause before speaking, take a breath, and choose your words carefully.
That's great advice. I definitely have a tendency to just blurt things out, especially when I'm feeling emotional.
It happens to the best of us. But if you practice, you can get better at being self-aware and in control of your communication. And that just makes your conversations way better and more productive.
It sounds like mindful speaking is all about intentionality, clarity, and choosing the right words at the right time. Speaking of tricky situations, in Chapter 4, Lassiter tackles the topic of conflict, which is something I think we all struggle with.
Conflict. We can't avoid it. It's a part of life. But how we handle it, that's where it gets interesting. And that's where nonviolent communication comes in, or NVC for short.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that, but I'm not really sure what it is. Can you explain it?
Sure. It's a way of communicating developed by a psychologist named Marshall Rosenberg. The main idea is to express what you're feeling and what you need without putting blame or attacking the other person.
So instead of saying, you always make us late, you would say something like, I get anxious when we're running behind because I worry about missing the beginning.
Yes, exactly. See the difference? The first one is just blaming, which just makes the other person defensive.
Yeah.
But the second way is expressing how you feel and what you need without attacking. That makes it way easier to have a constructive conversation.
Wow, it really is amazing how changing just a few words can completely shift the dynamic of the conversation. It's almost like magic.
It's a powerful tool for turning conflict into something positive. And Lassiter highlights this throughout the chapter, showing how, even in the most heated disagreements, it's still possible to find common ground and communicate with compassion.
That's encouraging. I know we've all been in those arguments where things just escalate quickly because of what we're saying. Learning to communicate better during those moments, that could be a game changer.
Absolutely. And, when we talk about changing things, chapter 5 is where it gets really deep. It's all about how the stuff going on inside us, our thoughts and emotions, how that affects the way we talk to others.
Ooh, now this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about this connection between our inner world and how we communicate.
It's like everything we're thinking and feeling, it's always there,
Mm.
right, underneath. And that colors the way we talk to other people.
Yeah, makes sense. Like that saying, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. If you're full of negativity, that's got to come out somehow, right?
Right. But it works the other way, too. If you're
Hmm.
feeling good, you're grounded, compassionate, that's going to show up in how you talk to people.
So it's not just the words themselves, it's also the energy you bring to the conversation. And that energy comes from what's going on inside you.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Lassiter talks about this practice called self-inquiry. It's basically taking a step back to check in with your thoughts and emotions before you react to something. Like asking yourself, why am I feeling this way? What am I thinking that's making me feel like this? Are these thoughts even true?
That sounds really useful, especially when things are getting heated. Instead of just reacting, you pause and try to understand what's going on inside. How do you actually do that, though? Self-inquiry sounds kind of vague.
I know, it sounds kind of out there at first, but it's actually pretty simple. Say you're in a conversation and you start feeling triggered or upset. Before you say anything, just take a couple deep breaths. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? What thoughts are leading to this feeling? Even just noticing those things can help you react differently.
So it's like you're interrupting that automatic reaction and making a choice about how to respond.
Yep. Makes a big difference. Self-inquiry, it's not just good for communicating, it can make you more self-aware in general.
That's cool. Speaking of self-awareness, there's another thing Lessiter talks about that really got me thinking. The words we use to describe ourselves. She says they can either hold us back or set us free.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. Think about it. How do you usually talk about yourself? Do you focus on your flaws and mistakes? Or do you talk more about your strengths and the good things you've done?
Good question.
The way we frame things, the stories we tell ourselves,
Mm.
that really affects how we see ourselves. And that affects what we think we can do.
It's like choosing whether to wear glasses that make everything look worse or glasses that make things look better. The lens you choose changes how you see yourself and the world.
I love that analogy.
Mm.
Lacer's point is, if we choose to use more empowering language, we can actually change our brains. Like instead of saying, ugh, I'm terrible at public speaking, you could say, I'm still learning and getting better at public speaking.
Subtle. But yeah, that changes the whole vibe. Instead of focusing on what you're bad at, you're acknowledging that you can grow.
Exactly. And over time, those little changes in how you talk, they add up. They can make you more confident and more willing to push yourself.
Like you're changing the story in your head from one of limitations to one of possibilities.
You got it. And, we've been talking about how that affects us individually, but language is also really powerful on a bigger scale, like on a societal level.
What do you mean? That's interesting.
Think about the language we see and hear every day in the news, in politics, in advertising. Those words and phrases they keep repeating, they end up shaping our values and what we think is normal, even if we don't realize it.
That's a little scary when you think about it. We're being influenced by all this language we're not even aware of.
It can be. That's why it's so important to be aware of the messages we're taking in and to think critically about them. We need to be aware of how they might be shaping our beliefs and how we see the world.
That makes me think about how important it is to get information from different sources, listen to different voices, and expose yourself to different stories. If we're only hearing one side, we're missing out on the whole picture.
Absolutely. Learning about different perspectives and different ways of seeing the world makes us more understanding and helps us challenge our own biases. And this brings us back to mindful communication. When we approach conversations with curiosity and an open mind, we create space for real connection and learning.
It's about recognizing that language can build bridges and foster understanding. It can help us create a more compassionate and inclusive world.
Perfectly said. Lassiter takes this even further in the next chapter. She talks about how our words aren't just sounds, they're vibrations that carry energy and intention.
Whoa, I like that. It's like our words are sending out ripples, impacting everything around us.
Exactly. And that's both empowering and humbling, right?
Mhm.
It reminds us that we need to choose our words carefully and be aware of how they affect others.
So every time we speak, we're putting something out into the world, either adding to the harmony or the disharmony. It's a big responsibility.
It is, but it's also an amazing gift. To be able to communicate, that's something that makes us human. And when we do it mindfully, we can do incredible things.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've talked about the power of words, mindful listening, how what's going on inside us affects how we communicate. But there's one more chapter to go, and this one might seem a bit strange at first.
You're talking about silence, right?
You got it. It seems odd to be talking about silence in a discussion about the power of words, but Lasater dedicates a whole chapter to it. I know, right? It does seem kind of contradictory, like we're talking about using our words, and now we're supposed to be quiet.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a head scratcher at first.
Yeah.
But silence, it's not just the absence of sound, you know. In fact, it can be super powerful when you're trying to communicate mindfully.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me how silence fits into all of this.
Well, think about a time when someone told you something really personal, something they were struggling with. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there with them. Quietly,
Yeah.
you don't need to say anything, just that silent support, it can mean the world.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely had those moments. Sometimes words just aren't enough. But what does Lassiter actually say about silence? How does she see it playing a role in mindful communication?
She makes this point that we're living in a world that's just overflowing with noise.
Yeah.
Like we're constantly bombarded with information, with stuff to do, with all these demands on our attention. And we rarely, if ever, take a break from all that.
That's so true. We're always plugged in, always connected. It's exhausting. And I bet that makes it even harder to really listen and connect with people when our minds are so full of all that other stuff.
Exactly.
Mm.
That's why bringing a little silence into our communication, it can be a breath of fresh air for us and
Mm.
for the people we're talking to. It lets us clear our heads, tune into that inner wisdom, and really listen from a place of calm and stillness.
Like hitting the reset button, huh? Instead of just reacting all the time, we give ourselves a moment to think and really understand what's being said.
Yes. It does take practice, though, getting comfortable with those pauses. We're so used to filling every second with words.
Yeah, it's like this automatic thing.
But the payoff is huge. And, it's not about never talking. It's about finding those little moments of silence, pausing before you speak, taking a breath, choosing your words thoughtfully.
It's about finding that balance between talking and listening, between expressing yourself and taking in what others are saying.
Exactly. And remember, like we talked about earlier, sometimes silence is the most compassionate response. Like if someone is going through a tough time, just being there with them quietly, holding space for their pain, that can be more powerful than any words you could say.
Showing support through your presence, not just your words. That's beautiful. Such a simple yet profound idea.
And as we wrap up this deep dive into Lassiter's book, I think this focus on silence is a perfect way to remind ourselves that mindful communication, it's about so much more than just the words coming out of our mouths. It's about being more aware of ourselves, more aware of others, more aware of the energy we bring to every interaction.
I totally agree. We've covered so much in this conversation. The power of our words, how to listen mindfully, how our thoughts and emotions shape what we say, and even the importance of silence. This has been a wild ride.
It really has. And I hope everyone listening feels inspired to take some of these ideas and try them out in their own lives. Even little changes in how we communicate can make a big difference, creating more understanding, connection, and maybe even a little more peace in the world.
I love that. We all have the power to make things better through the way we talk to each other. And as Lassiter reminds us, what we say matters. Our words have power. Let's use them carefully, and let's not forget about the power of silence, too.
Beautifully said. I really enjoyed chatting about all this with you.
Me too. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into mindful communication. Until next time, be mindful of your words and the silence between them.